Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. It's going to be a little bit different call today, so for those of you that are calling in for the first time, if you'd be kind enough to listen to this call to the end, I would suggest you go to our call of February 15th because that call will give you a detailed explanation of the turnkey program we've put in place to assist Dinarians. But this call is going to be a little different because I will address issues for Dinarians, but given what's going on in this country right now, I wanted to touch on the importance of establishing a family asset protection trust package, basically for any American. So let's go ahead and get started. The government of Iraq and the CBI are moving quickly to what they're referring to as the stabilization of the exchange rate. Now, they seem to use a number of terms. They'll talk about the glory rate. They'll talk about the original rate. Now they're talking about a stabilization rate, and sometimes there's confusion, understandably, about what they're referring to. In my opinion, when they use the term stabilization rate, I think they're referring to the reinstitution of the dinar in country at 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar. The rate's been all over the map in the last 18 months, let's say. And when we move to the stabilization rate or the 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar, we have to remember what's happened over the last 18 months. We went from 1190 to 1450, then we went to 1700. Since then, as we've begun the various reforms, we've gone from 1700 back to 1460. Now we're at 1300, and in my opinion, we may make one more stop, maybe let's say to 1,000 against a U.S. dollar, and at that point, I think we're going to move to a stabilization rate of 1-to-1 in country with the U.S. dollar, and then at that point, in the near future, they'll go on to the Forex and float globally, and that's where we're going to reach that Basel IV compliant equilibrium. In my opinion, certainly north of $3.22, probably closer to $4 and perhaps even higher than that. But I want to talk about the mechanisms that have been utilized in Iraq right now moving forward. And all of these things are happening with repeated meetings with the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve Bank, so this is very important. I've tried to just simplify it as I can. So we have phase one, which I would refer to as monetary reform. This has to do with the depeg in country from the USD, a substantial increase in dollar for the CBI holdings in the U.S. dollar, and purchase of gold. So when they depeg from the dollar in country, the dinar tends to float around. It was initially fairly weak, but as the CBI increased its holdings of the U.S. dollar and gold reserves, that sort of stabilized the situation. Then we go to phase two, economic reforms. This has to do with the transition to a private, diverse economy and rebuilding infrastructure in their electric grid. Now, it's interesting to note that the contracts that the government of Iraq has implemented in order to rebuild their infrastructure and grid have been done with Saudi Arabia, countries in Europe, the United States, and China. Notably absent from all of this is Iran. So this is important because the Iraqi economy and the nation state itself is not going to stand as a sovereign nation as long as they're joined at the hip to Iran, who basically is abusing the nation state of Iraq because they were in a position to do so. But with each passing day, that's moving away. Now, phase three is the currency reform, strengthening the IQD, ending the auctions, and reforming the corrupt exchange offices, even involving the arrest of some corrupt officials. So that's why, in my opinion, we're moving rather rapidly to, again, the stabilization of the exchange rate, which I define as one-to-one with the U.S. dollar in country. Now, lastly is the budget. There's been a lot of talk about the budget. As you know, if you've been a dinarian for any length of time, whether budgets were passed or not, the value of the dinar continued to fluctuate. At this point, I think the passage of the budget and the reinstitution of the dinar at one-to-one are not linked. Certainly, in a perfect world, it would be nice to see the dinar reinstituted one-to-one, float globally on the Forex, be in the IMF basket perhaps, and see it grow. But even at one-to-one, they could place that in the budget at one-to-one and then float it. But at this point, I really think that they're on separate tracks. The budget will be passed when it's passed, irrespective of what the dinar is against the dollar, and adjustments will be made once the dinar reinstitutes, again, in my opinion, around one-to-one, perhaps a slight premium over the dollar, and then go to the Forex and float globally. Now, over the last 10 years and longer, we've been marketing our trust to dinarians for reasons that have been explained time and time again. But over the last few months, it's clear to us that this trust must be marketed to every single American citizen in order to protect their privacy, their anonymity, their wealth, and their legacy, i.e., what they hope to leave to their children and their grandchildren. And based on the way things are going in this country, there are things that individuals are going to need to do to ensure, again, to protect their privacy, their wealth, and their legacy for their family. So, what I discuss from this point on is my opinion and my opinion only. This is not the express opinion of Trust Unlimited or any of the affiliates. This is my opinion. And in my opinion, the United States is in the midst of what I can only refer to as a progressive revolution. Financially, economically, politically, culturally. If you look at it from any angle, you know that things that are going on now, it's hard to believe if we look back 2 or 3 years where we were then and where we are now. The only analogy I can make is the fact that historians still marvel at how the German people were so mesmerized by the Nazi Party in 1930s. Well, I wanted to take a little closer look at that. Now, the minister of propaganda for the Nazi Party, and believe me, I'm not associating what's going on with the Nazi Party, but there are similarities in terms of the propaganda approach. Now, the minister of propaganda was by the name of Joseph Goebbels. He was a very successful propagandist in the early years. Of course, what the Nazi Party proceeded to do was to destroy a country. And in my opinion, what the progressives are doing are trying to destroy a country. I'm not saying that Goebbels wanted to destroy Germany, but I am saying that the progressive movement in this country does not like this country the way it's been established, our history, our culture, our system of governance. They don't like any of it. But Goebbels cited the early 20th century progressive movement, and they're following that method of propaganda as pointing to his success. And he specifically pointed to the creation of the ACLU, Margaret Sanger and the eugenicist movement, and a gentleman not too well known, Edmund Bernays, a marketing specialist dealing with the union of corporations, large corporations and government. And that's really what we're seeing going on in this country. So in a lot of ways, though, the Marxists and the progressives are very similar in their approaches. But what's interesting is the progressives and the Marxists have the same short list of enemies. Enemy number one is religion, and specifically Christianity. Enemy number 2 is the family unit. Enemy number 3 is the middle class and the small business owner. So these religious, cultural, and economic loyalties were unwanted in any system of totalitarianism where preeminence is not in the individual and individual rights, but in the preeminence of the state and the establishment of guardrails for what is and is not an individual right. Now, a good example of this would be COVID. When the COVID hysteria began, and I'm not going to get into all of that, you will remember that they said it was a very bad idea to go to church and particularly to take communion from a common cup. So there's religion. They also said it was not a good idea to visit elderly and sick relatives that were in nursing homes or for family get-togethers at the holidays. There's the family unit issue. And third, they shut down the small businesses, particularly small restaurants. And if you look to the small business sector, what you see is the majority are small restaurants. So there it is, their attack on religion, the attack on the family, and the attack on the small business. Now, while this was going on, remember, it was okay to go to Costco or to Walmart or to Target, but it was not okay to go to a small business. This made no sense, and fortunately, the American people finally came to the realization. Now, the other important issue right now are the House hearings, and I think they're going to expose the attempt of the progressive movement to transition from our constitutional representative republic to more of a social democracy. And remember, you keep hearing the term, we must save our democracy, save our democracy. Well, we tend to use the word democracy, but we are not a democracy. We are a constitutional representative republic. This morning I decided that I was just going to sit down and kind of make a checklist of the things that have gone on over the last 2 years. And as I did so, and this is probably a short list, but I went through this stuff, and the reason I'm going to bring it up is because there is a way to circumvent ourselves from a lot of this. So let me run through this list. The first thing is the uptick in crime, which I ascribe to, quote unquote, bail reform and defunding the police. Then we have the inflation rate and the creation of 87,000 IRS agents. Well, it's said that the way to crush the middle class is in a vice between inflation and taxes, and that's exactly what's happening. The governmental inflation rate's about 6.5%, but that's their jerry-rigged number. The real number is about 13 to 15%, and anyone that does their own grocery shopping knows that. Then there's the price of gas, for example. The price of food, the price of gas, the price of heating oil, these are the things that we must spend money for every month. And as you can tell from your own experience, it's much higher than 6.5%. Then we have the issue with taxes and the creation of 87,000 IRS agents. We're told that we need these agents to audit the billionaires that aren't paying their fair share. Billionaires have very competent legal representation. They're paying what the law says they must pay. These 87,000 agents are not in order to audit 750 billionaires. It's to audit the middle class. As a matter of fact, recently the IRS is going to start basically auditing waiters and waitresses. Once again, they're going after what? The small restaurants, which represent the majority of the small businesses, i.e. the middle class. Then we have the open borders. It's estimated that now over 5 million illegals have crossed our southern border. Now they're beginning to cross our northern border, and these are the ones we know about. Now, if you want to understand why this is happening, you need to Google something called Cloward and Piven. Basically, Cloward and Piven was a strategy to open our borders, create chaos, create economic calamity, so that growing government can fill that void. Again, to end our constitutional representative republic and replace it with an authoritarian government. Then we have, of course, the fentanyl crisis that has accompanied these open borders. Now, this isn't like COVID. This is a genuine pandemic. Over 100,000 people are dying every year from fentanyl poisoning. Now, with COVID, they finally had to admit that many people died with COVID, but not from COVID. As many as 90% of the numbers, the mortality and morbidity statistics for COVID, were jerry-rigged numbers. It's more like 9 or 10% is the actual number of people that died from COVID. And who were they? Elderly people with compromised immune systems. Then we have the debt and deficit issue. Biden's out there saying, I've reduced the deficit. This is how I've reduced it now and over the next 10 years. Now, it's a straight-up lie. I'll explain how this works. Let's say the budget for this year is $8. And the projected budget for next year is $10. Biden has spent $6 trillion additional dollars since he took office. Anyone could just look at the budget numbers, the debt and deficit numbers. How are they going down? How can he even say that? Well, he knows that the media is going to cover for him. What he's saying is he's reducing projected budget deficits. He's doing that by reducing defense spending. That's all. So instead of projecting we're going to spend $10 next year, the government's only going to spend $9. So he calls that deficit reduction. It's not. He's still spending more money each and every year. He's just spending less than the projected number, and he's cutting the projected number in areas that we need protection. For example, on our border and our national defense. Then there's the reemergence of something called the Real Estate Equity Program. This is a program where they want to end suburban areas and just create urban areas, concentrate people. And the way they're doing this primarily is by having large international conglomerates like Vanguard and BlackRock purchase up large tracts of residential property, largely because these local areas are rezoning the area for high rises. So an American citizen, for example, purchases a home, works hard for 20, 30 years, works on that home. It's his pride and joy. It's his castle. And now he finds out that 2 blocks away they've rezoned a large industrial area or school area or an area that has been farmland, and now it's going to be high-rise. So now there's going to be a congestion of population there. It's going to be a problem with traffic, with the roads, going just to the grocery store and run your errands. And now that you have this large high-rise area where people are able to move in and out, you have a lot of people coming in and out. Unfortunately, that there's a crime element involved in that, and the property of your value begins to plummet. So you need to sell that property before the losses get worse and worse. And that is their form of equity, dumbing us down, the same thing they're doing with the education system. Of course, we've seen that globalization has an inherent weakness, and that's a supply chain weakness. We even have a reduction in baby food. We still have people running around looking for baby food. But let's say we have a problem with China, and it's entirely possible given what's going on right now. 90% of our medications come from China. Substantial amount of our computer chips come from Taiwan. And what's China doing? It's saber-rattling, threatening to take over Taiwan. So let's say that it takes over Taiwan. That means that 90% of our medical supplies and 90% of our computer chips are controlled by China. That cannot be allowed to happen. Then we have the trans movement. Now, the transgenders are, in fact, a diagnosed emotional condition called gender dysphoria. Why are they trying to normalize gender dysphoria? Once again, it's the assault on the family. Then we have, there's no particular order in this, I'm just, as I was thinking them through, then we have the student loan forgiveness program. So we have someone that has a master's degree in gender studies. He has $225,000 in college loans, which hopefully the federal government's going to forgive. Now, who's going to pay for that? The taxpayer. Who are most of the taxpayers? Middle-class people, many of whom never went to college, or if they did, they paid their loans off. But that's the short game. The long game is to have free education. Free education means paid by the taxpayer. Free education means the government's in control. If government's in control of education, that means indoctrination. That's where they're going with this. Then we have the censorship issue, the denial of our First Amendment rights to speak freely. First, it was the government. Then they went after the social media to censor there. Now they're beginning to stop that. Now we have artificial intelligence, which is basically just going to be a rehash of what they want us to see and what they want us to hear, not the truth. Let's talk a little bit about foreign policy. What's happened in the last couple of years? After 20 years of war in Afghanistan, we ran away with our tail between our legs. Now Afghanistan's in the same shape as it was before. Vast denial of religious rights, vast denial of women's rights. We lost 13 of our troops as we fled the nation, and we left behind $85 billion of sophisticated military hardware that's now in the hands of our enemies. Now we have the situation in Ukraine. I don't want to get into a long dissertation about Ukraine. I'll simply say this: what we're hearing on the news bears no resemblance to the truth, and if you really do your homework, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Then we had, of course, the situation where now the administration has to acknowledge it was they who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline that was piping oil to Europe. The result of that, Russia has just suspended its participation in the START treaty having to do with nuclear proliferation. Now, since the end of the Cold War, the primary geopolitical objective of the United States and the West was to ensure the balance of power globally. That required a very strong United States, stronger than Russia economically, politically, and militarily, stronger than China economically, politically, and militarily. The one thing that could destroy that equation would be an alliance between Russia and China. What's the Biden administration done? Either out of mind-numbing stupidity or some nefarious intention, it's pushed Russia and China closer to an alliance. Then, of course, we have, as I mentioned earlier, the education system. Now I'm talking about primary education, introduction of critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and of course the trans movement. All of this being done without the knowledge and consent of the American people. Fortunately, they tripped it up, because when they shut down the schools at the behest of the education lobby, the teachers' unions, parents got to look at what was actually being taught in the schools. And they said, oh, no, we have to pump the brakes on this. So they went to the parent-teacher conferences, and what happened? They were labeled as terrorists. It's called the Parent-Teacher Conference for a reason. The parents have top billing. The government seems to have forgotten that. But what's going to happen, I believe, is that we're going to have a movement to move children to private parochial schools or homeschooling, because they're not going to tolerate what's been going on. So that's a good thing. Then, of course, we have the Green New Deal and what's going on with, and I've discussed this at length on my calls. I'm just going to mention one thing to give you an example of how these people function. If you'll remember, a few months ago on the news, and the government was very concerned about the lobster industry in the Northeast, because they said that they were killing whales. They were catching whales in their nets. Of course, the lobster industry jumped in immediately and said that's absolutely false. We are a highly regulated industry. We haven't killed a whale in 100 years, not one. It's a complete lie. And people were beginning to wonder, well, why would they use that lie? Well, I'll explain to you how they will use that lie. Because they were putting the windmills along the coast in the water, up and down the seaboard, the northeastern seaboard. These windmills release a very large humming sound. That humming sound scares off the krill. The krill are the food that is sustenance for the whales. So as the whales traverse the coastline, they can't feed. They become weak. They flounder, and they wash ashore. So what the left tried to do was blame the lobster industry for what they knew their new Green Deal would create. The windmills kill 500,000 birds a year, and now they're killing dozens of beach whales in a matter of months. This is what we're dealing with. Now I want to shift to something else. I've discussed this too. Executive Order 14067, creation of a central bank digital currency, elimination of hard dollar. This is absolute and complete control of you. You've lost privacy. You've lost the ability to purchase what you want when you want. And the fact that the currency will be used to institute a credit score means that they will be able to limit or freeze our accounts based on our political affiliation, even based on the things that we say publicly. They have said on repeated occasions that they are modeling the credit score of China, and that's exactly how the China credit score works. I'm just going to mention one other thing, and it's this. If you will remember, a few months back, Biden gave a speech. I call it the red speech. It was the speech he gave where he had a red background. He was on a podium waving his hands. Behind him were two silhouetted men holding machine guns. And in that speech, he absolutely went after American voters. Now, Donald Trump got a lot of criticism, and I agree with it to this extent, where he really, really went after some people. But you have to remember, he went after people that went after him, not in terms of his policy, went after him personally and his family. But Donald Trump never went after the American voter. Biden and his crew are absolutely targeting the American voter, calling them every name under the sun. And the red speech was the culmination of all of that. Now, why do I bring up all of these things? Again, because I want people to understand that there are things that we can and need to do to stop all of this insanity. The House hearings are going to go a long way to at least exposing the truth. I will give you just one example. When they had the January 6th hearing, there was about 3 minutes of video that they showed. The House hearing showed it. The media showed it. 3 minutes. They looped it. They showed it over and over and over and over again. Now, 3 minutes is a long time to watch something that's unpleasant. I used to box in my youth, and they used to have 3-minute rounds. Let me tell you something. When you are being hit and you're trying to hit someone else, 3 minutes is an eternity. So they took these 3 minutes and they looped them, and they showed them over and over again. You know what they didn't show us? Over 40,000 hours of video that they refused to release. This video has just been released to Fox News, and this video will be shown in the House hearings. It's going to be very interesting to see what the other 99.99% of this video shows us about January 6th. Now, why do I bring this up? Because we are being assaulted with disinformation. So here's what we need to do to circumvent everything that we've experienced over the last couple of years. We need to vote. We need to do our own research and educate ourselves. Don't believe anything they tell you, and don't believe anything I tell you. Please do your own research. I'll give you a list of things you can look into. And the third thing you need to do is to protect yourself and your family. And the only way you can do that is through the creation of a family asset protection trust package, and I'm going to explain to you in a moment how and why this protects you. Whether you're an individual that possesses an asset like these currencies that you think is going to appreciate substantially, whether you're a person of substantial means, or whether you're a person that's just a middle-class person. And I could argue that the less you have, the more you need to protect it for yourself and for your family. Now, when you establish our Family Asset Protection Trust package, you will protect your privacy and your anonymity. That's because the assets within this trust package are legally sealed. That means whether you're in a civil litigation case, whether you're in a criminal investigation or an IRS audit, they need to go to a court and show probable cause. They need to say, you've done something wrong and we need to see what's in that trust. Second, you're going to be able to avoid IRS harassment and scrutiny, because the IRS will know if you have a very sophisticated trust package like ours, you more than likely have very competent legal representation, and the IRS always goes after the low-hanging fruit. So they're probably going to leave you alone. Second, within this package of trusts is something called our gift trust. This allows you, if you're a denarian, for example, to gift currencies to family and friends to avoid the federal gift tax and control the post-RV proceeds. But whether you're a denarian or not, if you have substantial wealth, you can gift things to individuals, but still during your lifetime and thereafter control that wealth for the benefit of those individuals through the trust. The trust will also allow you to bypass the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. The federal estate tax can be as much as 65% of your entire estate. With this trust, the federal estate tax will be zero. This trust will also make it virtually impossible for anyone to sue you if you've got currencies both pre or post-RV. But if you're a person of means, whether it's because you're a denarian who has exchanged your currency and you now possess a lot of wealth, or you're an American citizen that simply wants to protect what they have, you will be able to do it through this trust. Now, this trust package was designed for denarians, although it's a very valuable tool for anyone, whether they're a denarian or not. This was the simplification of a rather sophisticated trust package that we utilized for our more affluent clients, a package that had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But by simplifying the package, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. That cost will be available whether you're a denarian or not. There are several ways you can pay for that. Pay us up front, we'll discount the price to $2,500, saving you an additional $500. If you can't afford that, we do have a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which sum would basically offset our out-of-pocket costs just to produce and deliver your trust package to you. That way, in addition, the balance would be paid in $100 monthly installments. There will be no interest charge. The only proviso is once the dinar reinstitutes, the balance would need to be paid within 30 days. If you're not a denarian, you're simply going to make the $100 monthly installments to pay the balance. Of course, you can pay it off any time you would like. One other option, pay us up front with a credit card. Not only will you get the $500 discount, but the minimum payment on your card would be less than the $100 a month you'd pay under our deferred payment arrangement. But we will work with you with whatever method works best for you, whether you're a denarian or not. Our objective is to help you get your affairs in order and your trust in place pre-RV if you're a denarian, or if you're an American citizen that doesn't like the way things are going and wants to make sure that the things that you've accumulated over your lifetime are protected for you, for your children, and your grandchildren. Now, you can go to our website, which is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc.com. You can request our initial trust package. You're under absolutely no obligation to get the package. You can review the package, contact us if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you. If you decide to proceed, everything you need is included in the package, but you're not obligated to proceed. You can review the information. It has a lot of information about the dinar, about our economy, about us, about the trusts. Again, you can contact us if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you. There will be no consultation fee. If you wish to proceed, everything is in the package. You can contact us by phone or email. Our email address is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc@gmail.com, and our phone service is 307-274-4122. I think I'm going to go ahead and go to a little Q&A here. I've got a lot of my phone's blowing up here, but let's go to a little Q&A. Again, if anyone would like to contact us to get our initial package, again, our email is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc@gmail.com, and our phone service is 307-274-4122. Okay, our first call here is area code, I think it's 415. That's 415. Go ahead.
Great Risings, Jim. This is Al. How are you, sir?
Okay. By the way, Al, I got your text. I will be calling you after this conference call, but I do not want to discuss that issue over the, that's personal issue. So let's discuss that when I call you later today, okay?
No doubt. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation this morning, and I do appreciate, the trust information, because I do have a trust. I purchased one, 10 years ago? I can't remember. I appreciate you in the presentation this morning. I do have one question, though, and that is if we go to common law, by the way, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How about you?
Too much fun. Good life won't leave me alone. But, your presentation, back to your presentation, it was awesome. I mean, you spoke on a lot of things. The only thing I didn't hear you exclaim on was division. They also try to divide us so that we move in confusion rather than unity. And
right. Yeah. You always have fractionalization, so you separate people by age, by gender, by political affiliation, by race, by religion. That again, it's chaos and confusion is their weapon.
Yes, sir. So my question is, if we go into this new paradigm, and it's like you said, Iraq, when they start, they're going to come out with a digital currency, which you spoke elegantly about, and then that's going to lead the rest of the world to come into the digital world. It's not crypto. It's not necessarily crypto. I'm sorry. What's that one they want to go into? Like you said, it's like China. They want to remove all currency.
Well, first they want to establish the digital currency, which they will, in essence, control, meaning that you can only do two things with a digital currency. You can either leave it in the wallet with the Treasury Department if you're an American, or you can exchange it for a good or a service. But by the establishment of the credit score, they know where you've spent the money. So if, for example, you have exceeded your limits in terms of the purchase of a weapon or something that's not consistent with the Green New Deal, things like that, they can freeze your account or limit it. They've already done that in Canada, believe it or not. So that's the intention there. But there are ways to circumvent that. One of the ways is to put your money into tangible assets, which is out of their control, that generate income. Now, if you purchase a precious or industrial metals, of course, they don't generate income. But you can invest in things that do generate income, like real estate investment trusts. It works like a mutual fund, but instead of investing in a portfolio of stocks and bonds, it invests in a portfolio of commercial or rural real estate that generate an income. So it's true that the the dividend that's generated would be in the central bank system, but the principal that's invested in the real estate investment trust would not be in their control. So that's an example. There are things we can do, and of course the best way to own tangible assets is within a trust, because pursuant to Section 643A and B of the Internal Revenue Code, we might be able to buy and sell within the trust without triggering a tax. So there, but those are all post-RV things, or things that wealthy people are already doing. But with the advent of the digital currency, people are going to have to, up their game and make adjustments in order to minimize. We can't totally minimize it, but there are things we can do to substantially minimize our exposure, again, to the central bank digital currency.
Okay, well, so I guess what I was trying to get clarity on was that digital currency, the definition is a currency backed by gold, or so I thought, or maybe I'm wrong.
No, a digital currency, like a hard currency, may or may not be backed by gold. However, we are moving through Basel compliances. We just hit Basel IV. So what that means is your currency, whether it's a hard currency or a digital currency, has to be backed by some commodity, oil, precious metals, industrial metals, etc. But whether it's a hard currency or digital currency has to do with how much control the government and the central bank of that government has over the currency, not whether or not it's backed by something.
Okay, I see. All right. Well, that leads me on another research, because I thought the foundation would be if we had gold, or like this gold-backed currency that the U.S. is releasing, or supposed. I'm just trying to do research, that would give us a phase based on Delarue saying that these new currencies issued would be running for 10 years. Then we would go into that latter where they remove currencies, and we're based on credits.
I guess what I'm trying to say is the transition to Basel-compliant currencies does not preclude or does not necessarily mean it has to be a digital or hard currency. The issue with the digital currency is control, not whether it's backed or not. That's that. Okay. I guess that's all. All right?
I got you. Well, thank you, and thank you for your presentation, because that was an awesome presentation this morning.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Bye-bye now.
Good day.
Okay, our next caller is area code 509. That's 509. Go ahead. 509, are you there?
Hello, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Are you there?
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize when it said unmuted, it normally says you may now ask your question. So forgive me, Jim. This is
Not a problem.
I have you seem to overwhelm people. Not overwhelm, but you get better. This call's better than the one before, and go on. Boy, it just gets gooder and gooder. I love it.
Well, the object in life is to progress. So I'm glad I'm not regressing.
No, not at all. Real quick, I'm curious as to how the QFS and the trust complement each other once this all takes place.
They're basically unrelated. They're unrelated. The purpose of the trust is to minimize your exposure to civil litigation and government intrusion. It allows you to grow an estate on a tax-preferred basis. It allows you to do so off the grid, i.e. privately. It allows you to transfer 100 cents on each dollar to your heirs without having to go through probate or be exposed to the federal estate tax. That's a little bit different than the environment that we're going to need to function in with the digital currency and with all of the other systems that are being put into place. While these systems are being sold as anti-fraud and providing safety and all of that, to some degree that's true, but again, we're ceding control to the central banks, which is not a good idea. The other issue is when everything is digital, remember, the government routinely is hacked by, kids screwing around with their computer. A third world war would inevitably involve an initial first strike with an EMT, electromagnetic pulse weapon, or if some just terrorist wanted to create havoc, they would use that weapon. That wipes out digital records. So we have to be very careful with the systems being put in place. I'm kind of old school. That's why physical possession of things, cryptos, gold, silver, industrial metals, things they don't want us to have, those are the things we should try to possess as well. Of course, we will be exposed to the digital currency, but again, if we invest in things like real estate investment trusts, a portfolio of real estate, it operates like a mutual fund. It's liquid. You can buy it, you can sell it, but it's still real estate. It's not in the central bank it's not in the central bank system at all, and it's not exposed to the central bank digital currency. So that's basically the difference.
Okay, and then the projected payouts, for example, the initial funding of the trust from the exchanges.
Well, that's the law in the banks that are going to determine payouts. And payouts, if you, let's say you have 10 million dinar, and you go to the bank and you exchange it, and let's say just exchange it for $1, that's $10 million. Well, according to banking regulations, right, that's your money in 72 hours. All right, now they may try to put limits on you, or they may try to get you to work with their asset managers or establish their trust. There's other things they might do to try to sweeten the pie for you. For myself personally, I'm happy with the street rate. I want complete, total control of my money. I want it in trust. I don't want anyone to know what I have aside from myself and my trustee and my family. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Now, there are some that are saying that there's going to be these astronomical payouts, for example, on the ZIM. I do possess some ZIM, but if I had to unload one of the currencies, it would be the ZIM. But what they're saying is, if you do the math on it, the numbers are astronomical, so you're going to get the thing annuitized. You're not going to have access to it entirely. But they're also talking about program rates and all these humanitarian programs and all that. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I think it's all crap. I think you're going to go to the bank, you're going to negotiate for a street rate. Some of the groups are, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, they're going to glean a little bit of money from having a group. Now, we had a number of clients that were in a group with Reno. We said to them, in our opinion, it was a bad idea. They gave their physical currency to this group in exchange for, quote-unquote, certain contract rates and moving up in tier or whatever they did. Well, of course, what happened? These people with all their currency disappeared.
Do you say Blano?
I didn't say Blano, but I know who Blano is.
Okay.
I know who Blano is. Blano, let's not even get into that guy, all right?
Yeah, no, because the name that you said sounded like you said Blano, and I just asking that clarification.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a guru. I don't follow gurus. Once in a while, someone will say, hey, you got to listen to this guy. I'll listen to him. 10% of what he says is on the money. 10% might be on the money, so I have to go do my research. Some of these guys are good. Some of them have good information. But as soon as you join this group, give us your currency, you can get a program rate, you need to present this humanitarian project, just walk away. Just walk away.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
You're going to I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. No, I understand totally. I've been listening to you for a couple whiles now, and I am tracking. But say the trust is able to purchase your adult children's homes and autos. and all being, say, for example, within the legacy process of USAA, those homes and the insurance and what have you would be each individual trust segregation of assets. Can you do that?
Yeah, well, what people might do is they may purchase homes, allow their children to live in it. The only thing the children have to do is provide for the upkeep. Now, let's say you purchased a $250,000 home and your son and daughter-in-law with their 2 kids live in that home, and they're going to pay the taxes on the home, and they're going to do the upkeep for the home. Well, because this is where it gets complicated, because it's technically your home. If they're doing things that a renter wouldn't ordinarily do, that might offset the taxable event ascribed to them. What's the taxable event? Well, if the rent on that home would be $1,500 a month, theoretically you're letting them live there free is a taxable event, which they could claim could be mitigated by the money that they do spend for upkeep, et cetera, et cetera. But by doing it that way, you could provide something for them. If you just give them the home outright, that's a gift. Well, you've exceeded the gift. You've got to pay a gift tax. So by retaining ownership through the trust, you're avoiding the federal gift tax. They, in turn, might have to pay taxes on what would ordinarily be rent. But those are post-RV issues we'll get into.
Right,
it's a little bit, but those are some of the issues. The other thing with the currencies is if you gift currencies through the gift subtrust, you've avoided the federal gift tax whether you gift it through the trust or not, because you gifted the currencies before they revalued. But with the gift trust, you then have control of the post-RV USD. The money is in trust, so it's protected along with your assets in your USD. But then they will have to pay the tax on the gain because they're the beneficiary. But because the money's in trust, you can then manage, invest, and distribute the money to them. Now, they may be individuals that are perfectly capable of managing it for themselves, but it's in trust in order to protect it. Or you may have a situation where the person's disabled, whether, unfortunately, they might be irresponsible or have, drug or alcohol issues. You don't want to give them a lump sum. So that's the advantage of the gift sub-trust there. But pre-RV, it's the same for everybody in that you set the trust up, you assign the currencies to the trust, okay? It's boilerplate in that respect. Post-RV, everyone's different age, everyone's family situation's different, everyone's time frame, risk tolerance is different, so everyone's going to go in a different direction.
Gotcha. Well, good. Thank you. I appreciate you, and I look forward to – I missed the first bit of your call where you normally go into the political ramifications of what's taking place in the country of Iraq. So I look forward to listening to the replay on the call to be able to pick that up.
The replay, sorry to interrupt you, the replay should be up by 5 today, but unfortunately on occasion it doesn't hit till the next morning, which bothers me because I get up and I have 27 text messages. Hey, Jim, are you okay? Everything okay? No call. So, so I usually text them and say, the call needs to go up. Well, hopefully it'll be up by 5 today. Okay?
Yeah. Well, when it doesn't go up, I just know that it's going to, it's like money in the bank. It's going to be there and
yes,
just
sir.
Check back later. So you take care, my friend. Blessings to you, and keep on keeping on.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye now. Let's see. Our next caller is area code 631. That's 631. Go ahead.
Jim, hey, it's Clay Blackwell from Salt Lake. How are you?
Clay, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm fine. It said unmuted. My area code isn't 631, so I don't know who that is, but it's your system said unmuted. So
that's my misread. It's 801, and then the next number 631. I'm sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to be certain that person didn't miss their opportunity. Listen, I want to see if we can get a consensus here. The reason I say that is because there are those out there who believe that Iraq's year runs from December to December, or December to January, and there are those out there who believe that they're on a fiscal year, and I'm one of those that believe they're on a fiscal year. And the reason I say that is because in 2021, They sent that to the budget to Parliament around the January 6th, 7th of that year. And they didn't actually finalize it till the very last day of the first quarter, which was their fiscal first quarter, which was March 31st. So ever since then, I believe they're on a fiscal year. Not only that, to further confirm that, you're fully aware that Seder, Mutadal said, has the street. He has control of the people. That's why there hasn't been any uprisings, any of that stuff, because Seder has told him, he said, look, let's give these guys 6 months. Let's give Sudanese 6 months to get this together and start pulling through on these reforms for the people. If he doesn't do that, we're going to raise our ugly head, and there's going to be rioting in the streets. And that's what they've been working towards. Because you notice, Seder hasn't said one thing since October of last year. He's been quiet as a church mouse. Well, just recently, he told them, look, if you guys don't get this together by February 25th, we're going to start protesting again. The reason I say that is we are close to this budget being finalized. I honestly don't know what the holdup is except for a calendar date. I really don't. They're talking about sending it to Parliament next week, which would be pretty much in line with what Seder's asking them to do. In addition to that, they've already indicated the reforms are in the budget. They can't perform on any of those reforms with a program rate. They can't do it. Any of those MOUs they've signed are completely worthless to these countries they signed them with unless they have an international currency. So this is my point. If this thing doesn't finalize by the end of March, all bets are off. The dinar will not revalue. It will not revalue. The streets are going to be erupt. Those people are going to be angry, and they'll be back to square one. I don't see that happening. I truly believe this thing's going to happen within the next 30 to 45 days, at the least. And I wanted to know your opinion.
Okay, I agree with everything you said except one thing. And I said it in my call. I think that the exchange rate is delinked from the budget. So if they pass a budget and they're still at a program rate, they can still function with the massive $100 billion they have in USD reserve currency, and that rate will, in my opinion, move toward 1-to-1. Now, in a perfect world, they go 1-to-1, they go to the Forex, but whether the budget comes out at a program rate, whether it comes out at 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar, or whether it comes out the day after they hit the Forex and let it, because remember, it's going to float, it's still going to move, it's just going to move in the right direction. So they're going to utilize, in my opinion, if necessary, the U.S. dollar, which means that the budget does not have to dovetail with the reinstitution of the currency or vice versa. But I agree with everything else you said. I agree that's what Seder did. I agree that their fiscal year is not a calendar year. I agree with everything you said there. And I think what I do think is I think Sadr, and I am myself, but I think Sadr is pleasantly surprised by Soudani. And he's in the ilk of Kazemi, and he is basically thumbing his nose at the radical Shia officials in his country and basically Iran, because the deals that he's striking is really putting a firewall between Iraq and Iran. So he's a moderate Shia, and I've also said on the calls, the only way the government works is if it's run by moderate Shia, and that's where we are right now. So, this thing could pop. This thing could pop.
Well, I think I agree with you with all you said except for one thing. If you look, you realize there's a high inflation rate in Iraq right now, and that's because they're de-dollarizing. They're trying to get rid of the dollar, or at least suppress the dollar, so that people will start using their country's currency, the dinar. So that dinar becomes the primary currency. The only way to do that is eliminate the dollars. So even though through the Basel process they have a strong Basel backing with the USD, they can't use the USD to function in their country and become Basel III compliant. Not only that, they can't go Article 8 either. You can't do any of that.
No, but they can use the U.S. dollar to fund all of the international contracts to rebuild their electric grid, rebuild the infrastructure, and a lot of other things that they want to do, import and export, balance of payments with other countries. So there are things they can do outside of the country to function. But it's a lot of there's a lot of layers to this. It's kind of complicated. There's different agendas. But I'm beginning to think that Soudani was the right choice. You know, I think Kazemi was the right guy for the caretaker government, and I think Soudani is the right guy for their government. So well,
I would agree that he's more popular and he's more accepted, not only by the Kurds but also by the government in Iraq. They all like this guy. But I'll tell you what, if he doesn't come through, he's not going to be any different than the rest of them. And I really believe this thing has to pop by the end of March, no later. We'll see, but I really believe that's our back wall.
At this point, I will be surprised if it doesn't happen. Let's put it that way. I was for 10 years. I would be surprised if it finally happened. Now I'll be surprised if it doesn't happen.
Well, this is what's interesting, Jim. I've held this currency since 2005. I put it away and literally forgot about it for years. Now I watch the news daily because there's been more activity now than there's ever been in regard to this currency.
Agreed.
Well, it doesn't seem to me that they would waste time doing all this if they weren't going to do something with it.
Well, it's all superfluous at a contract rate. So, that why do any of this if they can't do and they can't bring any of this to fruition at a contract rate. So, that's why I say I'll be surprised if it doesn't happen at this point.
I agree with that. Thanks for your time, Jim.
You take care. Bye-bye. Okay, my next caller is area code, area code 405. That's 405. Go ahead.
Hello, Jim. This is Doug in Oklahoma City.
Yes, sir. How you doing, Doug?
I'm doing well. I always enjoy it when Clay calls in. I think he's in Salt Lake City because he has some very astute observations and opinions on what's going on. Mine is a little different. My question is a little different today. Sometimes when you are talking about the examples of what would happen if the dinar revalues at a certain value, and if an individual holds so many dinars, normally you talk about 10 million dinars. So let's up that game to say somebody who may hold 20 or 30 million dinars, and let's say it, for ease of calculation, it revalues at $4. So you have 20 million dinars. It revalues at $4. So you have $80 million of potential wealth, and you have the trust. So the transition happens at the bank. The money goes into the trust, and it's sitting there as $80 million in value. Supposedly, by virtue of Biden's executive order, and I can't remember the number of it, the digital currency transition is supposed to start on July 1st. Am I correct in that? And then I have a follow-up. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, well, the number, It's Executive Order 14067. It was implemented in December of last year, I believe. And you're right. I believe it's July that the clock they start implementing.
Okay. So you have your $80 million in your trust. Does that $80 million automatically get digitized into $80 million of the CDBC or CBDC? Central Bank.
I don't think anyone knows, but what I suspect is going to happen is they're going to be phasing it in. One of the things they might do is they might continue to print hard currency, but they will sunset it. For example, they'll say, okay, in 5 years, this money's no good. You're going to, if you don't turn it in and can transition to our digital currency, it's toilet paper. So that may be the way they're going to do this. I personally think that this thing isn't going to go through. I could be wrong. I just don't think it's going to happen.
You think that there's going to be political restructuring and realignment to the point where the logic?
I think it's going to be delayed for a very long period of time, and if it does go to fruition, it's going to be phased in over a long period of time.
Okay, so from the perspective, go ahead.
I said that's just my opinion. One of the reasons I think that they even jumped on it was because they were scared to death of the cryptos. That's why countries started to say, okay, we're going to deal in cryptos. I think that scared them, and so that's why they're trying to jump into the game. This is sort of like the Green New Deal, where we're going to have electric cars, but we don't have any infrastructure to recharge electric cars. You can't get an electric car and drive from Knoxville, where I am, to San Francisco in an electric car and expect to get there in the time frame you would in a regular car. It can't be done.
One of the funniest videos that's on YouTube repeatedly is the weekend traffic from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. And the phenomenal line that these greenies have to get into about 3/4 of the way to Las Vegas to the charging station because there isn't any other place to charge your car. And so you look at these videos, and there's like 50, 60, 70, 80 cars in line to get into the charging station because that's the limit of their range. And they've got, 80, 60, 80 miles to go to Las Vegas, but they can't get there. And so they have to, and it just makes me laugh, but that's off the point. But from the point you go ahead.
I was going to say, if you really want to make if this comes to fruition, the real way to make money here is to invest in porta potties, because
porta potty at the charging station. That's funny.
Yeah. I'm old enough to remember in the 70s when people had to get in line to gas their vehicles, and we had the supposed gas shortage, and that's more of their nonsense. And then they had it like, depending upon your license tag or your birthday, odd or even days to go get gas. But remember, it takes 2.5 minutes to fill your tank. It takes 4 to 6 hours to recharge a car. So it's so absurd on its face. So that's why I say the digital currency, like the electric car, it just ain't going to happen, because on a gut level, American people are not going to put up with it. People that are not political, they're not confrontational, they just want to go along to get along. They're going to say, hell no, I'm not doing this. You can't have my gas stove, all right? You can't have my gas generator. I'm not putting these stupid things on my roof. They're just not going to do it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too far off topic, but I do believe that when you look at those videos of the people in line who have to wait because they're only 80 miles away from their destination, but they can't get there for another 3 or 4 hours or maybe 5, you just go, it's absurd. I don't get it. But what I want to get back to.
Well, before you go on, I have one point to make. Here's what I think we need to do. if you voted for Trump or if you voted for Biden, you have a sticker on your windshield. The people that voted for Trump go to the front of the line. The people that voted for Biden go to the end of the line.
Well, you know that will never happen. But hopefully
I know, but
there'll be some.
I'm just saying,
there'll be the.
You know, if justice were to prevail, you know.
Well, hopefully there'll be a restoration of logic in this nation, but that's
there will be Make America Gas again.
Oh my God! So anyway, I want to get to one point. You say that you have your resources in your trust, and you want to move it to non-cash but income-producing assets, and I understand that from the perspective that my biggest concern really is the digital coin. I think that is if that digital coin actually comes into fruition, I really think we're screwed. And that's my biggest fear is the digital, not fear, but concern is the digital coin coming in and controlling not only how you spend your money, but basically that they can control how you spend your money. And that is concerned. So you say you want to move your money into as revenue generating assets as fast as possible. If you have $80 million in your trust, and let's say you have $20 million, and there are many people who have many more dinars than that. That's not a simple thing to do. You can't just go out and start buying a bunch of crud.
Yeah, you can.
It's going to take some time.
Buy apartment complexes. There you go.
I suppose.
That's an example. And not only that, if you get $80 million, let me tell you something. You're going to want the investment credits and the depreciation from the purchase of apartment complexes, even if we don't have a digital currency, depending upon what the tax implications are. The IRS has still not responded to our request for confirmation of 643A and B, and of course they're trying to increase even the tax on the long-term cap gains. So there are things you can do. One of the reasons why I think the United States is inoculated from a lot of this crap and the digital currency is this. The digital currency eliminates our Fourth Amendment right to privacy, and it won't stand. It won't stand. I mean, either the Constitution goes down or the credit system goes down, because, again, it's a clear invasion of your privacy. So your personal
that's an interesting point. And from that perspective, I mean, if it went to a constitutional challenge, obviously it would have to go to the Supreme Court, and hopefully, cooler heads would prevail, and they would say that it's not proper. But who's to say where the Supreme Court will rule? I don't know.
Let me tell you what. The Supreme Court did not touch any of the election fraud cases because it was white hot. They didn't want to touch it.
I know.
I'll give you. Yeah. So they're human beings, okay, and they're scared. That's why I understand what you're saying. My favorite Supreme Court one is Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas has never been accused of being shy and not speaking his mind. He was being questioned at the House. They were having at the Senate was having hearings, and one of the senators asked him a question. The question was, and this was back when they were talking about Obama's birth certificate and all that. And the guy correctly said, well, forget the birth certificate. The question is Barack Obama a natural-born citizen eligible for the office of president or vice president? And Clarence Thomas looked at the guy for about 5 seconds, and then he leaned forward and said, Senator, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. So that's the problem. We have 9 people now, and, of course, the left is doing everything they can to intimidate them and let them know, hey, if we don't like the way you rule, we're going to make life difficult for you. So, that is a problem. But the configuration of the court screams that the Fourth Amendment right to privacy will deny the social credit score system. And that's what I'm hanging my hat on. That's one of the reasons why we've established the trust. You know,
that social credit score is. I mean, obviously they're using it in China and potentially other countries. That is, I think, the greatest potential invasion into everything that we value as Americans.
Absolutely, and that's why I think. It's like what they did with the gas stoves. They didn't come out and one of the agencies said we got to get rid of them, or they introduced something in the legislature. They just put it out there just to see what would happen, and they got their hands slapped so fast. So they're chipping away. They're doing everything that they know. If they can amend or repeal any of the Bill of Rights, it all falls away, and they won't stop. They're not going to stop. But, that's why we have the trust, to protect ourselves. What is it, Section 1? Article 1, Section 10, the contract clause allows us as private citizens to contract. A trust is a contract. Protection under the Fourth Amendment. We create a contract to ensure that our rights are protected. And the credit score and arguably even a digital currency is a grotesque violation of our Fourth Amendment right to privacy. So, that's in my mind, that's where we're going with this.
Well, many times you mentioned 643 A and B, and I've read it now several times, and to my understanding, that is the tax deference of assets, the gain on assets that are established in the trust, and if the IRS basically follows their own rules, or the Treasury does, those assets and that gain are tax deferred until you pull those things out of the trust. Is that correct?
That's our reading of it, but we think it's sufficiently, what's the word I want? We think it's ambiguous enough that the IRS can twist it. So we want absolute ironclad definition of what constitutes tax deferral within the trust. And we went to the IRS. The IRS said they will withhold a response until the event, meaning had to do with the evaluation. And our lawyers are like, whoa, what? What do you mean you're deferring? You know what I mean? So I know our lawyers aren't going to do it because, I don't have a law. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have a license to protect. But I said, I think we should go, once this thing reinstitutes, we should go to them and say, we want the answer to this question. We have a lot of clients that have currencies. We don't want to get burned because you reinterpret this differently. If we don't get a response from you in 8 weeks, we're going to file suit. And, of course, the lawyers go, what are you talking about, Jim? We're not going to sue the federal government. Why not? Why not?
The point is this. They may be, as you mentioned many times in the past, compelled to respond. But that compelled time frame doesn't necessarily mean immediately.
No, but that's why I'm
saying that I have.
But that's what I'm saying. When the currency reinstitutes, we have a compelling argument for them to answer the question. We have X number of clients. The currency has revalued. They're able and willing to pay their tax. What is the tax if the transition, the exchange happened within an irrevocable trust pursuant to 643A and B? They can't not answer us and then come back and try to claw it back post facto. In other words, once it happens, they're compelled. They're compelled to give us a timely answer. They can't say, well, the revaluation happened on this date, taxes are due on this date, you have 64 days to pay the tax. Fine. Tell us what the tax is. And we need to know within 64 days so we can pay the tax.
Well, as Clay was talking about earlier, that potentially this could happen before the end of March. I hope it doesn't. I really don't. I hope it happens in April because we would have all the way till July 15th. And what's that? Oh, yeah.
I agree.
I mean, if it happens in March, we're screwed. We only have like 20 days or something to figure out everything until April 15th. I really hope it doesn't happen until after April 1st. If that happens, then we've got time to figure out what's going on.
That's why I always say we want to have it in the first 6 weeks of a quarter, preferably in the first month of a quarter, which gives us sufficient time to compel the IRS to tell us what the tax implications are. Remember, one thing we're not talking about is the millionaire surtax. Does that apply to a campaign? You see? Or
is the millionaire surtax across the board every state? I know that California has adopted a millionaire, tax. I don't know what they called it, but I have relatives that live in California that own dinars, and they're just pulling their hair out because they don't know what the implication is going to be if this thing revolves. The fact that they're going to have to pay not only potentially 20% long-term cap gain tax, California 13% income tax, but also the millionaire tax. I mean, they could be up to 45 or 50%.
They'll be higher than that. They'll be 39.6% income tax. All right. Then the 5% surtax would put them at 44.6%. Then they got the 13.5% state tax, so they're looking close to 70%. They're getting hammered out there. They're getting hammered.
If they dawdle and if they don't get their tax in after the 15 days after the end of the quarter, they got 100% penalty tax.
Yeah. Well, that's right. What's 100% penalty on? Well, 100% penalty on the federal tax would be 90%, and then 13.5. They're in the whole 5%. So in other words, if it's $10 million, if it's $10 million at exchange and they don't pay any of the taxes, they owe $500,000. The $10 million's gone, and they still owe $500,000. That's scary. That's scary.
Anyway, there's so many issues I'd like to talk about, but there's other people on the line. Thank you so much.
Well, there's no one else on the line, but I think we're done.
Jim, thank you very much. Have a great day. Hopefully, we'll talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.
Okay, Doug. Take care. Bye-bye. Well, Doug was our last caller for this afternoon. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to our call. The things we've discussed here today are important to you. I strongly suggest you contact us to get our initial no-obligation package. You can contact us by phone or email. Again, our email address is trusts@gmail.com. Our phone service is 307-274-4122. Contact us. We'll send you our initial no-obligation package. It does contain everything you need if you wish to proceed, but again, you're under no obligation to do so. You can review the package. Contact us by phone or email if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you, and there will be no consultation fee. Our next call will, of course, be next Wednesday. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we'll be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Bye-bye.